So welcome everybody to Handmade Oxford Online, the interactive virtual craft fair starting from Wednesday the 15th to Sunday the 19th of September. Now, Handmade Oxford is a wonderful mix of exhibitor-led live sessions, workshops, demonstrations, live auctions, and the chance to purchase work directly from our exhibitors. Now, this all takes place on interact.handmadeinbritain.co.uk. My name's Alice, and I'm a part of the Handmade in Britain team. And this afternoon, it gives me great pleasure to be joined by Deborah Timperley. Now, Deborah is going to be talking this afternoon about the limitless world of glass sculpture. Now, we're going to be joining her as we discuss her inspiration behind her new sculptures and love of glass. Now, Deborah is able to work with glass in many different ways, and you will see if you look at her bowls from her sculptural pieces that it's obvious that she loves getting to grips with new techniques. Now, through this talk, she's going to be illustrating through a chat and showing us different pieces. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Debbie to you all, and we begin. So hello Debbie, how are you? It's really lovely to see you. Welcome to Handmade Oxford Online.
Hello, it's lovely to see you again as well.
Well, I can see we've got a fabulous piece waiting to go. So Debbie, I really want to kind of start with, could you give us a little bit, about your background and about being a maker, because it hasn't always been your career.
No, it hasn't. My previous career was in the hotel and catering industry. And what pushed me in that direction was a love of cooking. I never wanted to be a chef, but from about age of 12, I always really enjoyed cooking. And I think there's a really big crossover, because if you enjoy being in the kitchen, you want to learn about different styles of cookery and different ingredients. And about 25-30 years ago, I remember discovering a wonderful Thai supermarket in Richmond in West London. And it was so much fun exploring ingredients which, 2 to 3 decades ago, I'd never had before. Things like gal and gal and lemongrass and shrimp paste and fish sauce and, using the roots of coriander rather than just the leaves. It was all a revelation. And today, for example, the sort of new ingredients with vegan food, it's wonderful to sort of, pepper menus with things that I haven't used before. And I get kind of the same pleasure from finding that I can introduce different techniques and so into the methods that I use for making my glass. In fact, we'll come on to my new technique in a moment, but that, I think as a maker, you tend to always enjoy exploring new avenues.
So I know that this is like a new development is with your, rocky sculptures. And so before we talk about that, can you introduce these sculptures?
Yeah, I certainly can. Well, the joy of glass is its infinite possibilities, and I work with glass in many different ways. These pieces explore the beauty of stone bridges, rocky outcrops, dry stone walls. This is actually a harbour wall, and they were inspired by a visit to the northeast coast of Scotland. And I want them to be evocative of the landscape and suggest rocks and stones placed harmoniously together. And I want to contrast the sort of the really defined edges with some softness that sort of replicates the adjacent vegetation, which would be soft. And I look for forms which look natural. So that's an example of my harbour wall. I'll just put that to one side and show you another piece. This is based on a rocky outcrop in the sea. So it's got lovely shades of blues and aqua and greys, and then the clear glass at the top. I try to use blocks of colour which echo the surrounding landscape or the water, the sky. I feel that the pieces have a sense of place and atmosphere, and then you can see that's very three-dimensional. You can see all the way around from each viewpoint. It looks really nice. And here's another one that's a little bit smaller and just a little less heavy to move around. This is based on a stepped bridge over water. So I've actually used sort of sheet glass here in various shades of ambers and browns to create a kind of arch bridge. And then I've used the grey and the blue to give the sense of the water. And then here I've used clear glass because I want to sort of draw your eye through the bridge, kind of to the light beyond, to take your eye through the arch of the bridge. Yes, so that's a smaller piece that's is really rather nice.
It's wonderful to see those three pieces, you know, together and to see how they kind of different and move on. But how do you get from like the inspiration of the landscape and then go and create it on the workbench? I mean, it really seems like a mountain to climb.
Well, I build the sculptures from chunks of glass. So I break up large billets of glass in whatever colors I might want. So I've got a blue here, different greens, I might use clear glass, ambers, pinks, whatever color I want. So I make piles of glass, and then I've kind of got a palette to work with, you know, a bit like a painter with a paint box, you know, that's my palette of colors. And then I use sketches and photos to build the form of the sculpture, and then I actually glue it together. And just let me be clear here, there's no glue in any of the sculptures that you see, but because they're quite big pieces, I need to be able to get them into the kiln. So I glue all the pieces together, and then I can move the piece into the kiln, and then I pack it with a mold mix that's called Ludo, that I've made from breaking up old molds, and so it's quite granular. And it fully supports the glass as it melts because it's at the top temperature for about 4 to 6 hours. So it fully melts, but it's encased in this Ludo, which kind of holds it all in place. And this plaster Ludo gives the glass a texture reminiscent of the softness of the surrounding vegetation. And then I fire my sculptures over 6 days. So it's always a bit of a revelation when I open the kiln. Here's a piece which is slightly different to the others. It's called Rock Pool. It's a very three-dimensional piece. You can see it's sort of really got an interior here, and I've called it Rock Pool with sunset. You know, as the sun goes down, you kind of get that final last little slice of orange or red. And so this I first sort of made all different sort of bars of different shades of blue. I fired those separately, and then I put them all together sort of around a kind of base, which is the interior of the rock pool, and then put all these kind of blocks of color around it and refired it, so the piece was fired all together a couple of times. But I really try to make pieces that are really quite evocative, that give you a sense of the place, and try and capture certain qualities that I've really enjoyed from the places where I've got the inspiration from.
So tell us a little bit about, you know, these new pieces, because it'd be wonderful kind of to see how that's gone on. And what was your eureka moment, you know, when you came to this new?
Well, I was, I'll just put that to one side. I was in my workshop, probably kind of daydreaming, and my eyes lit upon a piece I'd done several years ago that was just kind of tucked away on a shelf. It's about 10 years old. It's got a crack in it because unfortunately I dropped it, but nonetheless I kept it, and you can see that it's of a dry stone wall, and it's of a tree behind that dry stone wall. And because I try to evoke a sense of place and of the surroundings in my work, I thought I could kind of use this sort of imagery as a sort of adjunct to the pieces that I was doing. And I've always liked drawings with expressive mark making, and that's kind of how I quite like to draw. You know, I think it's quite fun to draw with a biro sometimes because you're just more relaxed about it. So what I needed to do was to make a piece that had a little bit more surface area than some of my other pieces. So I did a piece, this is a very early one, so I did a piece like this that had sort of much flatter sides, and it had a lot more of the sort of the constructed chunky area on top. And then I did some very simple linear kind of engraving into it, which you can see after it was all fired. And then I used a sort of printmaking permanent ink that I could rub into the engraved areas that would make them more prominent than if I didn't add some extra color. So that was kind of one of the first pieces, because this is all very recent work, but I thought, oh, I think I'm going to like this.
I think there's, you know, really lovely. And it was lovely to see, you know, some of the ideas and then the mark making. And what's really nice is to know, you know, the inspiration. So do you use sketchbooks, you know, for your research and reference, you know, while you're working?
I do, yes, I do, because I work from photographs a lot and from sketches. And when I was thinking about these particularly, so here's some of the sketches that I did. I wanted something that were really very simple linear drawings. I didn't want to sort of get into sort of three-dimensional drawings or make them look very tonal. I just wanted sketchy, suggestive, kind of evocative drawings of meadow or seagrasses. So they do kind of look somewhat sketchy. And you know, you know, you can take engraving a long way. Well, I'm just working with it in this very simple tool, sort of as an adjunct to what I was doing with the rocky walls. And what's interesting is that I can give, with working with glass, I can give the pieces depth as well. I can work on both sides of the glass. So this piece, which is in grey, silver grey glass and clear glass, I've engraved on both sides. So the simple, just sort of fairly bare lines works quite well, because then it doesn't all get kind of too cluttered, and you can see the pieces behind, and all the grasses are blowing in the right direction. Otherwise it looks as though the wind couldn't make up its mind. So that's really quite an effective piece. And there's another one here which I've just introduced a few more colors into. So the same sort of idea, but kind of with the colors of heathers, really, with a sort of a bronze glass and sort of a moody blue and a pale pink. It's really rather a lovely combination altogether.
So we can see you know, that you start off with the sketchbooks, and we can see the images within. But then, what are you using to kind of transfer those ideas on paper into your glass sculpture?
Oh, well, it's quite a simple tool. It's I've got one here. A Dremel drill, so it's handheld, which is really rather good, because you can, it's far more cumbersome than a pen or pencil, but it means that I can you know, sort of fairly easily translate those sort of sketches onto the surface of the glass. So I do it kind of in a tray of water that just is deep enough for the glass. And sometimes I use glass dripping from kind of overhead, so that the surface stays cool and it stays wet, because if it gets too hot, the glass is likely to crack. And if it's dry, then obviously I could be inhaling glass dust. So it works always round to have it with water. So it's a very effective, responsive tool that I can work with kind of very immediately, and immediately see what kind of result I'm getting, which is quite different to the way I mostly work. Obviously, with the kiln, I don't know what things are going to be like until they come out of the kiln. So it's nice to do something that is immediately responsive. I have another piece here with engraving, which I've used kind of much brighter, sort of, I wanted the blue of the sky and the green of the landscape. And here, if you've seen any of my other work, I love using gold in my work. So this is a 23.5 carat gold, golden lichen, which I fire into the glass, so that's sort of there for good. It's fired in as part of the initial process of making the piece. So that's another one that's you know, sort of quite simple, but very, very effective. So I hope I've given you a little bit of insight into my continued journey with these rocky outcrops. I'm finding them very exciting to work on, and very motivating.
No, they're really lovely. Thank you so much, for running through, and kind of what the theme for me, when I kind of look through the collections, is that excitement of things changing. So what kind of drives you to really kind of go out and find new ideas? Is it really important that you keep adapting and keep finding new things to keep you stimulated? Is that one of the things, that drives collections?
Yes, it is. It is very definitely. Because that's why I'm so thrilled when I do sort of see the next way forward. I don't want to just work with motifs and kind of keep doing the same thing with minor changes again and again. I mean, I've changed sort of the rocky outcrops from sort of the harbour walls of rocky outcrops, and then more recently I've introduced the arched bridges. So that was sort of a development there, and then it just takes time. You can't kind of make it happen, but when it does, it is kind of like oh, I think this is going to, oh, I really think it's going to work visually, and if I can get it to work technically, that's that's really good. Because I always start with I don't think to myself, okay, I've got these techniques and I've got these pieces of glass, what am I going to make? I don't tend to work like that. I think to myself, right, I've got this idea, I'd really like to do this, and then I think about the how am I going to make it? So that nearly always comes second, and I think that's probably the secret to really doing original work.
I can see behind you've got a little kind of piece peeking on your shoulder. Can we have a look at that? Because that's a really nice way to demonstrate that you've got those kind of rock forms, and you've got this beautiful kind of round, vessel behind you. That's
so this is a bowl behind me. This is, no, the glass is always quite heavy. So this is quite different. This is one of my cast bowls. You'll see that it's got the 23.5 karat gold fired into it, and it's got a lovely sort of polished undersurface, lovely polished rim, and then all this lovely texture is made from fabric, and then this sort of mosaic are enamels which I fired into the glass in a second firing at the same time as I slumped the bowl. So there's about 4 or 5 different blue enamels painted in this grid, which actually took me quite a long time to do. I realized when I started it I was going to be doing it for quite a while. Yeah, so that is a cast glass bowl. You'll find that on the website too.
What's really nice actually is because we've seen kind of rocky sculptures, we've seen that beautiful bowl there. What always strikes me is how tactile your pieces are, because even with that bowl there's raised pieces, and then obviously with those sculptures, you just want to kind of grab and feel those jagged edges. Is that important for you to have that relationship with the work, that you can touch it and you can feel it and feel? Is that important for you?
Yes, it is. That's quite an interesting question. I do like, because I like working with the fabric, with fabric as well. I do like creating different textures. I've got a piece here from my dialogue at the Threshold series, which is using textures as well. And ever since I was at university, sort of 25 years ago, I've cast fabrics into glass and use the textures. And this is a very, very textural piece. And I think, or what I also like is kind of sometimes creating, well, particularly with this body of work, kind of a bit of an element of surprise. It looks soft. It looks like a soft cushion, with this gold block kind of protruding from it, but of course it's not soft, it's hard, it is glass, so a little bit of a play I always find quite interesting, and then nearly all my textures with my bowls and this body of work do come from fabric, which of course we think of as soft and pliable, cozy and comfortable, whereas when it's translated into glass, it's none of those things.
I think when I've looked at your sculpture, I always feel you're capturing something encapsulated in the glass. So you can see that kind of that movement of fabric is kind of now kind of, kind of not made hard. It's kind of just solidified, and then kind of seeing the archway. So where water would run underneath, you've kind of captured that as well. But also I see, colours and, blues and gold, and again, kind of greys and white. Do you have a palette, or is it you just responding to what you see and what you have, to choose from?
I don't keep to the same palette of colours, no. I mean, often for this body of work, I've used a lot of black and gold because I find that extremely, a powerful combination. I do like using gold, so I do bring that in where I can, because I use it not for the kind of the bling value, but I like gold because I think it has an allure and it draws you in. But I think more often, particularly with the rocky sculptures, which I want to be very evocative of place and atmosphere, then I tend to try to work with the colours that will kind of give that sort of sense of place. I mean, here's another one similar to the ones I was talking about earlier, but it's not engraved. But I decided just to leave it without engraving because I think the colours are so beautiful. They're quite subtle, but with the blue, I'm not quite sure how good it's looking here, but with the side, it's sort of colours of the heather and the landscape, and then kind of the clearness of the sky. But they're very evocative colours, so they're quite soft. But they kind of work to convey the sense of the atmosphere and the place that I want to.
They're wonderful. What I really enjoy about your pieces is scale. How important, how large your pieces, or is it, other the processing or actually creating it that limits you to size?
I would say weight can be quite limiting. You can see as I move some, like the picture, the sculpture that we started off with, the harbour wall, is quite heavy. So I probably don't want to work with glass that's much heavier. I don't think I'd be very good at making very big pieces. I think the sizes that you see are kind of my optimum size. For and I think also when I use fabric as a to create the texture, I'm not sure that it would work so well if it was a really huge scale.
We've had and actually a really interesting question come in. So we've spoken about your tools, and obviously we've been talking about the size of glass. I mean, someone's actually written, how much do you enjoy using your hammer when it comes to really kind of breaking up? And when you use the hammer, does it really give you those different sizes for you then to piece together?
Yes, yes, I quite enjoy it actually. I always make sure that I've moved my dog out of the studio and she's in the car, because it is really quite loud, and having goggles on and whatever, and it doesn't crack exactly how I want it to. So I score it in the way that you do for, and whether you're cutting sheet glass or billets, but it kind of does its own thing. So but I do really like, yes, I do enjoy using the hammer. Then it's quite good fun, and then I end up with these piles of different coloured glass. So whether an array of greens, an array of ambers, or whatever the colour that I've decided I'm going to work with, and then I'm thinking about the forms that I'm going to make, and then building them. Using the chunks as literally as building blocks. Because that is what it's about. It's about rocks and stones placed harmoniously together and trying to create natural forms in a material that comes as blocks. Yeah. So that's kind of my aim. That was an interesting question.
Yeah, no, now just coming to to the end. I think my final question for you and behalf of all the attendees is why glass? What is it about glass that just enables you to, to have freedom and create?
It is quite challenging technically. If you don't get the technical side right, then it doesn't work in the kiln. It can crack. It doesn't. And it will only flow one way. You see, you kind of have to work with that. So I probably really enjoy the technical challenges, but it isn't just glass that I work with. I work an awful lot with fabric and with plaster. I make molds for everything, and so I probably enjoy the plaster just as much as the glass in terms of methods of making. I think plaster is a wonderful material. You can do so much with it, and it captures every little nuance, every little stray thread if I'm casting from fabric. So I really enjoy working with the plaster and the buckets of plaster. That's really glamorous. But I do think glass, so plaster is not very glamorous, but glass is, and it's got lovely colors, so it's a great combination.
It's beautiful, and the pieces that we've seen and seen today are wonderful. It really shows the range that you have and the different ways that you're using the material to create them. So Debbie, thank you so much for walking us through the collection this afternoon. It's been really lovely to have a chat.
And it's been really lovely to take part, and yes, I've enjoyed it, and you've asked me some interesting questions, which we hadn't planned.
No, which we hadn't planned. Not at all. That's what we get with all of our attendees. So I'd like to say, Deborah, thank you so much. Once again, and thank you to everyone who's watched here with us and on Facebook, and for those that are watching, after you're watching an event, Handmade Oxford online. And once again, thank you so much. We've really enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you soon, Deborah. So we'll see
Thank you.
Bye bye now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.